Welcome to a Too Much Effing Perspective rock and roll recreation, where we replay one of our effing favorite episodes from the past. I'm your host, Alan Keller.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Hoffman. Today, we're featuring our conversation with Corin Tucker and Carrie Brownstein from my hometown heroes, Sleater-Kinney.
You just saw them play, didn't you, in Portland?
Yeah, I did. And they were amazing. They're on tour right now, supporting their outstanding new album, Little Rope. And they were playing to a sold-out crowd at McMiniman's Crystal Ballroom here in Portland. And the fans were going nuts.
Nice.
They're on tour most of this year, between the U.S. tour they just wrapped up and going to Australia in about a month and then to Europe. And it was really exciting to see the crowd embrace them the way they did. But, you know, it's interesting. That doesn't always happen when a band returns home.
I know. You'd think when a band makes it or is on the rise, the city would take pride in the fact, but that's not always the case. Hometowns can be really fickle. I know my band, The Falling Wallendas, the worst place we could play was our hometown, Chicago. We got rave reviews and great response everywhere else, but at home, nope.
And when I was a tour manager for the Bodines, interestingly, they found more success in Chicago than they did in their hometown of Milwaukee.
I think it's a weird psychology. I think some people are mad that their little secret is now out and everyone is horning in on the action, or they're just plain jealous. You know, guys you used to see around town busking for quarters at Walgreens, getting Neosporin and Flonase, you know, now have big careers and they have other people going to get Neosporin and Flonase for them. I know it can kind of make you peeved off.
Yeah, I don't really know that feeling, but we're not just making this stuff up. We also heard that from one of our guests. Devo's Jerry Casale told us that their hometown, Akron, Ohio, and the greater Cleveland area really didn't embrace them for a long time until they had some major hits. And then it was like, oh, okay, now we're into you guys. But even that embrace was given with some reluctance.
Well, you don't have to go to Devo to find this out. Alex, you've been shunned by your hometown, Beaver Dam. I mean, both people who live there have turned their back on you, and you can't get a phosphate or an egg cream anywhere in that town. Old Otto won't even look at you. It's really sad.
Old Otto. Yeah, to be shunned by the Golden Beavers, that's pretty painful. But actually, Beaver Dam was my former hometown, right? But all of that started way before our podcast. Meteoric rise to the
bottom. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
To the bottom. I mean, come on. Our downloads actually grew by hundreds of percentage points last month.
That's true. He's not lying. If Beaver Dam actually had the internet yet, I bet both those people would be listening to us because it's really impossible to avoid this podcast nowadays.
Come on. I've had enough of you insulting my former hometown. So let's get to our October 21st, 2021 chat with our friends Corin Tucker and Carrie Brownstein from the great Portland band Sleater-Kinney. We'll kick off with a news story that wasn't in the original episode. But first, a short break. Corin and Carrie, thanks for joining us. I heard the interview that you both did on Questlove Supreme. I did notice it was kind of funny at first, and then it began to kind of grate on me a little bit, where he kept saying Corrine.
Sure.
Oh, Corinne this or Corinne that. And then Carrie would say, oh, yeah, well, Corin did this, or said that.
She's so polite. I know.
And it was also everything with Sleater-Kinney.
God damn it.
Yeah. We're never doing that show again. So anyway, not to throw any shade at Questlove, but do those things bother you at all, or is it just like, whatever?
No, I'm just so glad that somebody's interested in our music at this point. I think when I was younger, it really bothered me. And now that I'm older, I'm like, come on. You know, I'm just happy to be part of the party, part of the conversation.
Also, we have a new guitarist and friend who we play with, and we were pronouncing her name wrong for like the first 2 months. And she finally one day, it was actually where we were recording Tiny Desk, and Corin's introducing the band. And Bobby, our guitarist, says, hey guys, I just want to let you know that it's not Fabby, it's Fobby. And we were like, oh my God, we're a bunch of idiots. So it's like, you know, it's easy to cast the first stone, but you're like, wait a second, we all do that. And once something latches on your brain, like pronunciation, it's really hard to let it go. So I think other people are more sensitive to it. You know, like when I hear someone say Corin, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know how to correct this. But I think we all have those aspects to ourselves. Like, where we're misunderstood, and you just get used to it. And I think other people take it more personally in the end than you do.
Carrie, I just wanted to tell you that I saw a film the other night called The Nowhere Inn that you wrote and directed and co-starred with Annie Clark, also known as St. Vincent. And I thought, wow, here we're doing a podcast with you about a mockumentary. This is Spinal Tap, and you just made a mockumentary. Is that a good way to characterize it?
It defies categorization in some ways, but I think mockumentary or meta-mockumentary or some kind of hybrid psychotic docu-style movie is the best I can do. But it's a weird film. And of course, I think anyone making something about music that is also satirical and is kind of skewering life on the road is always paying homage to Spinal Tap. Rewatching it in advance of this interview, I was like, oh, so many references have just embedded themselves in our culture. The provenance was Spinal Tap, whether you know it or not.
Well, the opening scene of your movie is the inversion of the limo scene in Spinal Tap, where they close the partition on the chauffeur, Bruno Kirby. In The Nowhere Inn, Annie Clark gets the partition closed on her.
Yeah, it is the inversion of that, and it's the bad omen for her, as it was probably a bad omen for Bruno Kirby. But actually, he probably did fine. The rest of the band it actually went bad for that band too, so who knows?
Well, Bruno Kirby died, so I guess maybe it was a really bad omen.
That's true.
Okay, on that cheerful note, let's get down to brass tacks. What are your favorite scenes in This Is Spinal Tap?
My favorite scene is definitely the party scene. And I love that it starts out with Fran Drescher and she's just looking gorgeous. But the band is all like, who is this? What's happening? Like they're so clueless. They don't even know who this is. She's just like smoking and glamorous, like, oh, boys, come over, and it's so clubby. And there's so much going on in the party scene that I absolutely love.
Have you had Bobby Fleckmans in your music career?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's actually cool, right? She's actually smart and funny. I mean, she reminds me a little of Megan Jasper at Sub Pop, right? Just like this woman that's fully in charge. She's also from the East Coast. She's got a bit of an accent. She's very outgoing. And she just, she's great. I love her. She's probably my favorite character in the movie.
There's so much going on in that scene. Isn't that the cold sore scene too?
Yes. Yes. That part is just so random where you look up and you're like, wait, what?
I guess originally they actually had the instance where they both contracted herpes, but they ended up taking that out and just making it a sight gag, which is so great.
Yeah. I think that's actually better.
Carrie, I want to ask you, what is your favorite scene in This Is Spinal Tap and why?
I really like the scene at Elvis Presley's grave. It's so abject. And I don't know, it's just kind of this like quiet, weird scene. But I feel like it's very relatable. Like they're trying to make this profound moment out of something. And they know the cameras are there and they're going to harmonize. They're paying homage to one of their heroes, one of these like musical legends, and they're just failing. And I think I appreciate like the introspection in that moment, and just it's a pretty grounded scene actually compared to a lot of the movie, but it feels like a distillation of everything that's going wrong for them. So yeah, I like that one.
Well, that's a Too Much Fucking Perspective scene.
Yeah, it's like our title track.
Have you been to Graceland?
I have, yeah. I think we went on tour. You have to go. It's obligatory.
What's it called? The Safari Room or the Cheetah Room? What is that?
The Jungle Room.
Oh, the Jungle Room. I knew it was some Marlon Perkins special in there.
There's a pretty little thing waiting for the king down in the jungle room.
See, you're doing the same thing where like you're starting to sing, and then if we all tried to harmonize, we'd be in the exact same boat.
We wouldn't want to go raga. Don't want to go raga. I don't even know what the hell raga is. That's how non-intellectually curious I am. I've never actually looked up raga.
Just a pronunciation of reggae, isn't it?
I don't know.
Could be.
Is it a thing?
Could be something else.
I was once on tour with this little band out of the UK called Balloon. And as we were driving through Memphis, we stopped at Graceland. And being relatively new to the music business myself, I thought, well, Elvis was on RCA Records. These guys are on RCA Records. Surely they'll embrace us and just let us pull the van right up in front of Graceland to take a photo. And so we tried to convince them that that was the right thing to do, but I got shut down on that one. Anyway, you guys were just on tour with Wilco, and there's a couple of headlines that I found, and I just want to throw these out there, and then I want to hear what some of the great experiences that you both want to share with us. Kansas City Magazine said, KC COVID fallout. Wilco and Sleater-Kinney show moved from Midland to Grinders after Garth Brooks fiasco.
I don't even know what the Garth Brooks fiasco was, except I guess his tour was shut down because of COVID.
There was the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and now I guess the Garth Brooks fiasco.
I mean, I don't know. Something about Midland sounds like something, but Grinders, that could be a strip club. I mean, who knows? But the Kansas City Pitch says, Sleater-Kinney at Grinders, KC on August 12th, 2021, amid a hellstorm. And then jambands.com said, Wilco and Sleater-Kinney play a shot in the arm to resume rainy Forest Hills show.
Yeah.
And lastly, the Boston Globe, Sleater-Kinney, Wilco bring the heat. So there's a lot of meteorological references in these headlines. So tell us about it.
It was definitely a weather-heavy tour. I feel like the weather was our proverbial band member. Grinders is a sub shop, right? It is kind of some kind of...
I think it's like a sandwich barbecue situation. It's really like a giant wood pit. Like you're playing like an outdoor pit, basically, that's filled with wood chips.
Wilco got rained out at that show. They didn't even play. We didn't sound check because it was pouring rain. The crew had to cover up all of the equipment. The venue employees had to cover up all the lights in their gear. We played 30 minutes and then Wilco never played. They had to play in their dressing room and do a live Instagram stream. So that was a little anticlimactic.
Weren't you the DP on that, Carrie? Wasn't that being shot for you?
I was one of the DPs. Technically, it was actually one of their techs, but I was the second camera, B camera. And then New York was Hurricane Henry, which dumped a lot of rain. We were in Queens at Flushing Meadows, and yeah, big rainstorm. That's our set was cut short that night because of lightning. They had to clear everyone out.
You would think a town called Flushing Meadows wouldn't have a problem with rainfall.
I know.
We were on stage and they're like, clear, in your ears, like, clear the stage. And then they do this announcement where they're like, shelter in place.
Whoa.
And fortunately, that stadium has speakeasies built underneath it, bars under this weird tennis stadium. So, the audience can go down, fortunately for them, they can go underneath and just drink, which they did while this effing hurricane was just dumping rain. And Wilco's like, well, stopped, because the lightning is really the thing that clears everything out. You can't play while there's lightning, but rain, sure. So Wilco goes back out and plays during this hurricane, and it's just dumping rain on their poor audience. Stands out there in ponchos, almost 4,000 people just stay. And the front of house out in the audience gets flooded. Where the soundboard is,
Whoa.
There were 6 inches of water. And so the poor techs are standing in water while operating all of this equipment. It's just
very safe.
Really, really
Yeah,
safe.
I don't think that met OSHA requirements. I think something...
No, nothing on that tour really did.
My band was known for being meteorologically challenged. And every time we played, even indoors, there would be like a tsunami or something. And I got electrocuted so many times, you could have run a model train set off my lips. Did you guys ever get zapped bad?
Oh,
Yes,
so
definitely.
many times.
Yeah, I've been shocked so intensely that I basically just see stars. And
Wow.
Definitely in the early days when, particularly in Europe, there's always grounding issues, or you'd try to sort of configure like, oh, I'm sure if we just use this adapter that's not up to code and act like we can plug your American amp into this British plug. It just, it was lots of hijinks like that. It's fortunately been a long time since I've been shocked, but that can really fry your brain. It feels pretty intense.
It's really one of those things that just makes you angry. And people don't realize it while you're like trying to sound check or whatever. And they're like, oops, sorry. And you're like, God, and trying to keep your cool and go on with the show. But it's kind of impossible. And then sometimes they'll just be like, put a sock over it.
Oh, that's so gross.
That is the worst. Like, we're just going to put like a little muffle here. But you're still physically being shocked the entire time.
But also then smelling someone's sock. It's very derelict.
Come on, you two are punk rock. That's just like the day-to-day, right?
Yeah.
That's the day-to-day. That's the dream.
That's it. That's living the dream.
When you're using someone else's mic ever, it's
so gross.
When you can smell the breath of someone else, like the mouth smell, the saliva of someone else.
I played after John Popper.
Oh.
Yeah, from Blues Traveler, and I had to go in his mic, and it smelled like, a grinder.
Yeah.
Smelled like a
I was gonna say,
grinder.
when you're playing at CBGB, you're smelling Joey Ramone's breath 20 years later or whatever. So we already heard your weather report from being on the road with Wilco. Could you share some of the other highlights and even the lowlights of that experience?
I would say the highs were very high and the lows were very low, and they often were split-second moments next to each other. I think getting to do Red Rocks was obviously a career highlight. It's a gorgeous venue built into these very red stones in the walls of this beautiful canyon. Very famous. Every big rock act of the 70s and 80s has done it. Backstage is up above the main stage. There's this weird little cave. You just take a little stairway up to, and it's built into the side of this mountain, this canyon or whatever you want to call it. But it literally is a cave, right? So you open a very heavy door, and it's several rooms, cave room here for the crew, and then there's a couple of rooms for the band, but it's this long, windy cave where they had to bring our wardrobe cases up here and bring all our stuff back there. But we were just ecstatic to be there. There's pictures of Stevie Nicks on the wall and talking about Fleetwood Mac being there, every famous person, all of these amazing package shows they had in the 80s. We're like looking at all this before we play. The weather is, for this show, beautiful. It was a gorgeous night, wasn't it, Carrie?
Yeah.
It really was.
It really was.
I'm trying to set the stage here, trying to set the scene.
Work with me here. Work with me.
And we all have friends and family there, right?
Wait, are
We
you
all
setting
have-
up for something to go wrong? Because I feel like it was a good show.
No, after the show, remember?
No.
Oh, all right, let's just tell the story. Okay, so we play this amazing show. I have friends out in the audience. Our drummer has his entire family
I
there.
don't know where you're going with
And we play this incredibly beautiful show. We're like high on life, but it's still COVID, right? So right after the show, we have to go up to our dressing room, right? We can't be mingling out there. We're like doing very strict protocols, right? So we very obediently go right back from the stage into our dressing room, which I mentioned before is like a cave. And we open that door, and all six of us in the band are just like, yes, we did it. We played a great show. We walk into that dressing room, and someone has taken the biggest dump.
Oh,
That's right.
Like epic. And it's the tiniest space. There's no windows. It's inside of a cave. And so we walk in there, and it's like particulate. It was so
Gross.
disgusting.
story.
It was like walking into an outhouse.
I loved also knowing that it had to have been someone we knew that was taking that opportunity while we played to have a private moment.
Private
wait,
moment.
was it in a toilet or was it on
No. It was in the toilet, but I'm just saying like the whole dressing room was like a tiny tin can inside of a cave.
Yes.
Yeah, the glamour
that
and the
was-
squalor. They sit side by side on tour.
They really do. They really do.
That's a great story. It's a perfect illustration of what you were describing, Corin.
Well, it's interesting how often that comes up because we just interviewed drive-by truckers and they're told an entire story about Jason Isbell having a bowel movement.
And having a fan try to talk to him through the door.
Those were the worst days of when you played small venues and you didn't have great days to play small venues. But the worst aspect, I should say, was often that there was not a bathroom in the dressing room.
Right.
So you would be 5 minutes before you play, you're waiting in a bathroom line. Meanwhile, the fans are like, why aren't they on stage? It's like, well, I have to wait in this long bathroom line. It's like all of the mystery is just taken away from you at that point. You're like, hey, how's it going? Don't worry, I'm washing my hands. Like, it's just, you're so exposed.
That is so classic. The indignities.
The indignities. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Some of our band members, it was their first time doing a bus tour. And we had the bus driver sit everyone down and be like, no number 2 on the bus, and that's like, it's pretty astounding that you realize like half of your time on tour is figuring out when that moment is going to happen for you.
Gosh, we're really peeling back the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I did not expect to be having this conversation with you two, but all levity aside, it is interesting how this topic comes up in various forms. Again.
Why would you think we wouldn't have this? Like our last guest was the drummer from OK Go, and their dressing room was a broom closet. So he peed in a bucket, thinking it was just a bucket, but it was actually the marquee letters. Oh, and he got caught. And now every time he plays, what was the club in Boston?
The Paradise in Boston.
And so every time he goes, they always put a bucket out by his drums and say, Dan's piss bucket. I mean, for years and years and years, every time.
Never live it down.
That sucks.
That's what you want to be known for.
I also want to hear about your band, your tour manager, your crew, and trying to kind of just crank the machine back up after the post-pandemic hiatus. Any Spinal Tap moments in that experience?
We had a bus driver who admittedly was a bit rusty because after COVID, the buses themselves were rusty, right? They hadn't been driven. So all kinds of things were going wrong. And one night we were bouncing so hard in our bunks, right? When you go on the road at night, you're trying to sleep, but they're going over construction, the rumble strip, just all this stuff in your bunk. And you're like, what is going on? And this one night, we're like actually texting each other, what the F? And Carrie was like, I just got air in my bunk. And we find out the next day, the bus driver had forgotten to lift the hydraulics on the bus. So we were just like flapping around like cargo, just like a bag of bones in the back of this bus.
So unsafe. So unsafe. Not as bad as our bus driver on our last European tour, who might have been like one of COVID's patient zeros. Like it was February. It was literally like February 2020, and we had this like really sick bus driver. We were like, man, that guy sounds terrible. I wonder if there's something going around.
I was talking to this friend of mine, and the lead singer in his band got COVID in like March 2020. And I said, do you know how he got it? And he said, yeah, we think he got it from Tom Hanks.
Oh, wow.
Seriously, the guy had dinner with Tom Hanks like when Tom was sick.
I would like to get it from Tom Hanks.
It's a better COVID, yeah.
That's what everyone's...
Yeah.
With PJ Harvey, our bus broke down a block from the White House, and we just took the stuff off. We never saw that bus again. People who haven't been on the road can kind of imagine a little bit how disruptive that is. But my experience is you can begin to integrate with the bus, right? It kind of becomes part of you, and you become part of it when you're out for a while. It's not easy to move out.
No, it's basically your home.
We had people who had never experienced the drop-off before, right, on this tour. And our tour manager, unfortunately, had to leave us a little bit early. He got a better gig.
What?
And
not possible.
So we're driving. Yeah, I know. And we're driving into Chicago. We've told everyone else on the bus, we're getting dropped off here, Chicago, early morning. And it's just me and the bus driver sitting up front. And he's like, can you wake everybody up? We're almost there. I'm yelling like, get up, everybody, just using my mom voice. And we get near the hotel, right? But they're like, oh, well, you can't go actually to the hotel because the bus is too big. So we're in the alley behind the hotel. And you can imagine with these people who have been living on a bus, they've never done this before. And they have so much stuff. And the hotel is like, we can't get you to the front. You're going to have to come through the back. The concierge comes out. He's like, oh my word. He's like a very uptight guy. And we are going through the kitchen with like 6 guitars, all of our stuff, backpacks. The drummer is wearing a sombrero and he has a paper bag full of his clothes through the kitchen and into the front lobby of this very fancy hotel.
If that isn't a scene out of Spinal Tap, I don't know what is. I mean, that is epic.
I was in Chicago when your Portlandia partner, Fred Armisen, was playing drums in Trenchmouth. And a friend of mine, actor Eddie Jemison, told me he worked with Fred and D'Arcy from the Smashing Pumpkins at this coffee joint called the Java Jive. And every once in a while, Fred would just drop his tray and run out of the place and chase someone and say, you didn't pay. But there was nobody there. Which brings me to my next point. Carrie, you made the transition from music to comedy, and I did the same thing. I was in a band in Chicago. I went through the Second City program and started writing sketch comedy. And I basically had 2 different personas depending on what I was talking about. And I've noticed the same thing with you. When I see interviews with you about Sleater-Kinney, you're very serious. But when I see interviews with you about Portlandia, a lot less so.
I guess it depends on the interview and the topic. Traditionally, like our straightforward Sleater-Kinney interviews are a little more serious. Like the questions we get asked sometimes are really heavy, like politics and culture. I mean, it's not lightweight stuff. You're sort of reading the room in terms of conversational tone. I feel like it's more that than what I'm bringing to it. If someone's like, well, there was riots in Portland when we were talking about like the Sleater-Kinney record, like it's not that funny. So I think it's, for me, just more contextual. But what I appreciate, I guess, about having both is they kind of do fulfill the 2 different sides of me, which don't really feel schizophrenic, feel like a part of the whole. And I like being able to kind of code switch between the 2.
That long form video that you both did with the Path of Wellness, right? I mean, there's the reenactments and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's some laugh out loud moments in there interspersed with the music. I think that worked in kind of a nice way.
Yeah, that was really fun. We kept like the music part of that very earnest, but it was fun to kind of just mess with everything else because there is a silliness that both Corin and I have that obviously Sleater-Kinney is an earnest endeavor, but I think outside of the music, we are a little more multifaceted than that. And so it's nice to have an outlet for other things.
Okay, I'm going to read you guys a line and you can respond. This is the review for Spinal Tap's album Intravenous de Milo. Quote, they're treading water in a sea of retarded sexuality and bad poetry. And then Nigel Tufnell responds, well, that's nitpicking, isn't it? Wouldn't you say that review and the response pretty much sum up the toxic masculinity of rock music for its entirety?
Who wants to take that one?
Oh, wow. Corin probably does.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that Spinal Tap is poking fun at all of that. And it's skewering it so well. It's the whole idea of them being like so overinflated with their sexual references, all of it.
When Nigel is confusing sexy and sexist. Yeah. I feel like that is like the crux of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was just sexy. It's like, yeah, it's not. Like it's just, and I think there is some general misunderstandings about that. Those layers have started to get peeled back. And I think one reason it holds up so well is because it's the total deconstruction of it in such a great way. And you can laugh along with stuff that you are like, it's true because it did exist. It still does to some extent, but certainly not as bad as it was.
It's amazing to me with all the misogyny and not only that, like the pedophilia in music. Is there like a covenant between groupies and musicians that they don't come out? Why haven't more musicians been held accountable for their actions? Because there certainly is a lot more that's been swept under the rug, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I definitely think that there has long been an air of tolerance for sexism in the music industry. And I think we're starting to get there, but it's still just like taking such a long time. But I think finally, the most egregious offenders are being taken to task, like R. Kelly, I mean, that took so long. It took so many people in such legal lengths to finally cancel that guy. But I think it's going to happen more and more. Sexual assault is being taken more seriously. I do think there's going to be more repercussions in the music industry.
Speaking of R. Kelly, back in about 1995, my band, The Falling Melindas, were mixing a song at a Chicago studio called CRC, and we had the off hours. Like we were there from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But in general, the time was blocked off for R. Kelly. And all night long, we would get calls from females. Hello, is Robert there? Is Robert there? And, at the time I thought, wow, this guy is pretty popular. But in retrospect, I'm wondering how old those girls were. And it kind of creeps me out now. Let's talk about parenthood. So I have an 18-year-old daughter, Sunny, and her favorite bands are Sleater-Kinney, The Breeders, and St. Vincent.
Wow, good taste.
Yeah, she's got good taste. And I think she'd like my music more if my lyrics, which I wrote long before I was a dad, weren't so aggressively male. Corin, you did a solo album, 1,000 Years, and you referred to it as a middle-aged mom album. Have you had any problem migrating from being the perhaps solipsistic rock star to being the mom writing lyrics for their kids' generation?
Yeah. I've tried to consciously incorporate the perspective of being a mom into a lot of my songs. And I think it's actually a huge part of who I am and also who I am on stage. It's very maternal to a lot of people. And I think it was always there. So there's so much of that thread through all of my songwriting, really, I think, of feeling that strength and also that frustration of taking care of people all the time and finding space for my own needs and the selfishness and the selflessness and all of that, I think, is actually a huge thread through my songwriting before I was even an actual mother. And I think some of my better songs are ones where I embrace it, like What's Mine Is Yours. That song, it's a total rock and roll song, but it's a very caretaking song. It's kind of about listening to people and telling them how much you love them, and that this mess that we're in, whether it's our cultural mess or a family mess, like we're going to get through this together. And people respond so strongly to that song, I think, live, because they want that connection. That's something that you can do as a singer and as a writer.
That's interesting because in my life as a writer, I was having trouble with that transition from the single guy perspective to the married guy to the family guy. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, maybe I was having trouble with that transition in my life in general, because I remember when we were moving from Chicago to Los Angeles and I was driving, it was late at night, we're on Route 66. My wife was asleep in the passenger seat and my baby daughter was asleep in the back. And I remember looking at them and thinking to myself, I didn't know any of these motherfuckers 10 years ago, It really made that transformation complete. But, going back to my daughter, now that she's old enough, I really want her to appreciate my music, at least half as much as she appreciates yours. Are your kids fans of your music, Corin?
I wouldn't say either of them are fans, but I think that it's interesting. They definitely have different reactions to seeing me perform. And my son was mortified. He was absolutely mortified. Like when we got back together in 2015 and he was like 14 at the time, he literally would turn around when we performed or did a sound check. Like he was just like, I cannot watch this. Especially if mommy was acting kind of sexy on stage. He was just like, you know.
But you weren't being sexist, right? We know that now. We're clear on that.
Right.
Sexy,
exactly.
not sexist.
Yeah. But my daughter is really different. She is way more open to it and wants to hang out, wants to come to the shows and we'll watch a little bit. You know, not a whole set. It's fair. It's fair. It's interesting. She's a little bit more open to it, I would say, but not fans. No, that's just not going to happen. No.
This made me feel a little better. In an interview with New York Times, Bruce Springsteen admitted that his children haven't exactly dived into his back catalog. Quote, "We had our kids late. I was 40 when our first son was born, and they showed a healthy disinterest in our work over these years. They had their own musical heroes. They had their own music they were interested in. They'd be pretty blank-faced if someone mentioned a song title of mine."
That makes me feel better too, just in general. But I feel like that is the natural progression of things. Like you have to kind of reject what your parents are doing.
But it hurts. It hurts. We're still humans.
Well, I will say Marshall couldn't look at Corin, but would be like, Carrie, great show. Like, thank you.
I totally would.
So I'm wondering, do parents ever treat you differently when they find out that you're a rock star?
I think there are those moments, and it's like about 10 seconds before we're doing a fundraiser. Like it's literally like, oh my God, I know your band. Oh, the school fundraiser. That's amazing. and then, but no, the thing is they're like, wait a minute, you're in a band with Carrie Brownstein. Oh my God. And the amount of Portlandia swag that I had to commandeer for the fundraising, it was epic.
That's hilarious.
Carrie, of course, was always very gracious about it. Signed posters.
What if I wasn't? That would be so weird.
You know, I used to work for TED Talks. So I tried to bring TED swag for these fundraisers. No one gave a shit.
Really? I feel like people love that stuff.
They love it for free. They don't want to pay for TED stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But we had a very typical LA fundraiser where the guest stars were Slash, and Slash's wife, who was very boozy, came up there drunk and was like, "Come on, I'll even give you a kiss." And then all of a sudden, all the bidding stopped immediately. And then the musical guest was the Pussycat Dolls. This is for a preschool fundraiser.
I love it.
I wanted to try something that we haven't tried before. This is going to be a round robin thing where I say the name of a club and each of us will tell a one sentence Spinal Tap moment that happened there. Okay. The 930 Club.
I mean, Washington, D.C. Do you remember any crazy stories from there? Aside from just eating those cupcakes?
Those cupcakes. Oh my God. Those cupcakes.
I don't remember getting cupcakes
they're addictive.
there.
I feel like I've eaten more than one.
Oh, that's where I had laryngitis and I had to have a doctor shoot me up with prednisone in the ass right before I played.
Yes.
That's pretty Spinal Tap. That's the only time I felt like, oh my God, there's a doctor with a needle and he's asked me to pull down my pants. This feels very rock and roll. It did help me sing.
Oh dear.
Well, here's a story about the 930 Club. That was on a tour where, believe it or not, Lizzo opened up for us.
Oh my goodness. How cool.
Yeah, Lizzo was there backstage. And I remember looking over and she was getting very cozy with our manager at the time. And we were like, what is happening?
But not like in a weird, I think she's just so charming.
She's very charming. It
was more about our
funny.
manager being like, I'm in love than
Yeah.
Lisa doing anything.
For sure.
Funny. Well, those are two good ones. At the old 930, I remember being with a band that didn't get a lot of love. The bands that got a lot of love got to go eat at the Hard Rock around the corner. The bands that didn't get love had a frozen pizza in the dressing room. And I remember sitting in that dressing room, eating my slice of frozen pizza and seeing a rat crawl across the HVAC pipe or whatever it was in the dressing room. So that's mine. Okay, next one, CBGB.
Well, Corin and I, in such an amateur move, lots of shows at CBGBs are late. We were on at like 11, and we thought, let's go to the top of the Empire State Building before we play.
I think we loaded our stuff in. We were like, let's do it. And we did it. I still have the ticket. We went to the Empire State Building.
Went to the top, came back down, and played a rock show. Not bad.
That's pretty cool. The ultimate tourist experience in New York City.
That's awesome.
Mine is that when Radiohead played there, Creep was huge on MTV. They put it at number 5 in the set because they didn't want it to be like the big show ender or whatever. After they played Creep, Tom said, okay, now the MTV crowd can leave.
Oh,
Did they? No.
classic. That's such a 90s move.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. 40 watt.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, 40 Watt in Athens. I mean, mostly I just remember hanging out with Vanessa from Pylon at that cool record store next door to it. And also,
Yo-yo.
that's
Low
where I
yo-yo stuff.
found the Raincoats record that before it was reissued widely. Finally found that Raincoats album.
I have a good story at 40 Watt.
What is it?
I don't think I can tell it. I can't tell it. I'm sorry.
Where can your fans find your stuff, find out what's happening, your social media, whatever you want to promote or whatever you want to, how you connect with them?
Your fans know this. Our listeners, where can our listeners find all of us who know this?
So our website, Sleater-Kinney.com. Obviously, the Sleater-Kinney Instagram, we try and keep that updated.
That's definitely the one that we do personally. Is Instagram.
We have announcements about what's upcoming.
Or you can just come to our houses. You ask where to find us. We're usually at home.
What about your movie?
I believe The Nowhere Inn is now available to stream on all the usual streaming outlets.
Disney Plus?
Yes, it's all the usual outlets, but mostly Disney Plus.
So thank you so much for your time, for your generosity, for your insight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Corin and Carrie, thanks so much. So much fun.
All right, take care,
All right,
guys.
bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this blast from the TMEP Show past.
And make sure you do a deep dive into our other hysterically humbling episodes with musicians from The Police, Heart, Garbage, Soul Asylum, Drive-By Truckers, Old Crow Medicine Show, as well as comedians Fred Armisen, David Cross, actor Amy Brenneman, artist Shepard Fairey. Everybody's on our podcast. Every single person.
Every single body. And you can find our entire catalog on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This is Alex Hoffman.
And I'm Alan Keller. Thanks for joining us on Too Much Effing Perspective. Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This Is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. This podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions.
Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Evergreen Podcast Network.